The WMBA Americas hosted SEFCON V on November 12, 2014, and John Lothian News was there. We interviewed 14 SEF operators, regulators, and participants and put together this three-part series on the state of SEFs 1 year into the mandate. Part 2 looks at the differences between U.S. SEF rules and those of other jurisdictions. The conference featured a panel on cross-border issues moderated by ISDA CEO and former CFTC Commissioner Scott O'Malia, and also a keynote address by current CFTC Chairman Tim Massad.
It was great to hear the perspective of an international organization using the data. Once again, the benefit of Dodd-Frank is the data. Using the data to show that there's clearly a bifurcation between U.S. dollar-denominated swaps and euro-denominated swaps. What does that mean? It means it probably wasn't the desired outcome. The derivatives market was a global market prior to this.
I put up some slides that ISDA's developed using the available research and data from LCH, and it shows a market in fragmentation. Liquidity is fracturing along European markets versus U.S. markets, and that's a problem, in my opinion, and a problem for our members.
An attempt was made earlier in the year to reunite liquidity pools by allowing U.S. SEFs a special designation called a Qualified Multilateral Trading Facility, or QMTF, but the initiative proved to be a failure.
Alex McDonald was speaking more specifically about the failure of the QMTF and how, surprisingly, the movement for the path forward that the EU and the US had taken turned out to have a detrimental effect because the QMTF crashing and burning was a function of really disingenuous negotiations between the FCA and the Commission. And in fact, the positions between those two entities from a practical perspective widened rather than narrowed due to the failure of the QMTF creation of a dual recognition of platforms.
So by the end of the first quarter, when the rule sets couldn't be agreed between the regulators, the urgency of the issue rather went away because the major market participants by that point were using some of the no-action relief letters and the process of subsidiarizing or creating non-US persons in Europe to do their non-US swap business in order to service their non-US clients in a way in which they were able to continue doing the business without a large and liquid QMTF venue to go to for that business.
So there's a lot of repair work going on now. Edwin from the FCA made representations that at the conclusion of this year, early next year, there'll be a QMTF2, where hopefully the rule base will be more outcomes oriented as opposed to the platforms operating offshore having to replicate exactly and completely the SEF rule book. But we'll see how that plays out.
Bifurcation for sure has happened. There was an attempt around QMTF earlier on in the year to try to bring some of harmony to platforms across the Atlantic divide. That didn't play out, and as a result I think that extenuated the bifurcation of those markets at that time.
Another nagging cross-border issue is the regulatory timing gap. U.S. SEFs were granted temporary registration in 2013 with final registration pending, whereas European regulations MiFID and MiFIR are not expected to be finalized until 2017.
Well, there is, as I say, such a cacophony of messaging coming out of all the regulators, be that in the ODRF, the Cross-Border Regulatory Forum, or IOSCO, to get substitute compliance and recognition that we are going to get something. And today, I think we heard some interesting messaging coming out as well, that the CFTC does not feel the need to wait until 2017 and the implementation of all MiFID rules for that to happen.
The challenge is you have a very specific rule book driven SEF regime here in the United States, and we're guessing a little bit at what the European rules are going to be. But if history provides any context to this, driving a very rule-specific U.S. regulatory regime and matching that up is going to be difficult. They all professed a desire to see harmonized rules with an outcomes-based approach, but saying and doing are two different things.
The question is all in the detail of whose rules may apply when. Can you also substitute money laundering rules? Can you also substitute participant qualifications? Can you also substitute the trade reporting to trade repositories? in addition to the current news story, which is the recognition of CCPs, which they want to get sorted before you get recognition of venues.
Well, to borrow a phrase from Churchill, this is not the beginning of the end, but it's certainly the end of the beginning. I think of a 5-act play, I think we've closed Act 1 and we're moving into Act 2. So the rules have been passed, clearing is now up, people are using it, and now we're in Act 2, which is we're operationally beginning to trade on SEFs.
Chairman Massad's comments. He doesn't want to see the U.S. lose its ground as operating the world's strongest financial markets. And that's a great thing to hear, right? When you know that the chairman of the CFTC is saying, listen, regulation makes stronger markets. We have the strongest markets in the world. We want to keep those strong markets. So I thought of all the good things I heard today at SEFCON, that was one of my favorite. I think it shows a great willingness on the part of the agency to get this right, to get moving again, and to retain the title as the world's safest financial markets.